tank, and they didn't want them anymore, probably because the lionfish ate all the other fish that were in the fish tank. And so instead of giving it back to the pet store, whoever had it probably dumped it in the ocean. And the lionfish invasion is history. It spread. So we can track it back actually to about 9 individual female fish, just 9. And there had to have been a male, so at least 1 male. And the lionfish invasion started from that in the late 80s. So just to go over some interesting facts about lionfish. Again, they're invasive. We covered that. They were released probably from aquariums. That's how they got all the way over here from the Pacific over to the Atlantic and the Gulf. And they're venomous. So who can tell me the difference between venomous and poisonous? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah?
I'm going to give it a shot.
Okay.
Poisonous is if you touch it and you get sick, and venomous is if the animal comes you and you get sick.
Close. So poisonous means that the poison is actually in the flesh of the animal. Like if you were to eat a fish, it has poison in its tissue, and you would get. Venomous deals with anything that's external. So there's venom in a spine, there's venom in a fang, like how we have in snakes, there's venom in the barb of a stingray. So venomous is external, meaning that there's nothing wrong with the tissue of the fish. You can actually eat lionfish and they're quite delicious. Poisonous means that if you eat it, you're going to get sick. So pretty important difference there. Lionfish have 13 venomous dorsal spines on the top. So all of these spines that are spiky up here, they contain venom. There's 2 venomous pelvic spines and then 3 in the back on the anal fin. They grow very fast here in their invaded range, and they have very few parasites. They also have less competition here because there's nothing that really eats them. And they also have genetic vigor. So imagine lionfish that were caught all the way in the Pacific Ocean and then made it all the way over here on a plane and then got dumped in an aquarium and then got sold from a pet shop and made it through that aquarium and then got dumped into the Atlantic Ocean and still survived. That's some pretty strong genes, right? So we have basically the fittest of the fittest lionfish that have invaded in this range. So here's a little time series from 1985 to present. And this red dot is the very first lionfish that was seen off the coast of Florida. You'll notice that as we get into the late 90s here and early 2000s, the dots start to spread all the way up the East Coast. Then it starts to get into the Bahamas, and then in late 2009, boom, it hits the Florida Keys, and then from there follows the loop current into the Gulf of Mexico, and there was a spread. So a really unique time series, how just in really not that long, about 20 years, lionfish basically spread from the Atlantic all the way through the Caribbean and the Gulf. So here's a little infographic that just came out yesterday with the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries that basically sums up why lionfish are very bad as invasive species. So the biology. Every 3 days they reproduce, and it's 50,000 eggs every 3 days. That's a lot. We used to think it was 30,000. New research just came out that shows 50,000 eggs every 3 to 4 days. They are sexually mature in a year. So it only takes a year for them to get to the point where they're releasing this 50,000 eggs every 3 days. They've got those 18 venomous spines, and they can live for 30 years. So a 30-year lifespan, and you're producing that much every few days, that is a lot of fish that you're putting into the natural system. They're 17 times as dense here in their invaded range than as they are in their native range. There's a lot more fish, a lot more biodiversity in the Pacific. There's also a lot more parasites that are found in lionfish in the native range. So there's things that keep them in check there that don't keep them in check here. They can live in very shallow habitat, all the way down to habitat 1,000 feet deep. So they're not picky about where they live. The first one was sighted in 1985, which we saw on that time series. And they affect national marine sanctuaries along the East Coast and here in the Gulf of Mexico and in Florida. They can create some very bad impacts to reefs. So down here we've got a nice little graphic that shows before an invasion, where we have a lot of different species, and then after, where we have a lot of lionfish and just a few species. And that's because, like I said, lionfish aren't picky about what they'll eat. They'll pretty much eat anything that they can fit in their mouth. So they're known for decreasing the native fish on the reef and really reducing recruitment in these areas. There's over 100 different prey species that have been found in their stomachs. Basically, again, just meaning they'll eat anything. And 1,000 lionfish can consume 5 million prey fish in 1 year. So that's a lot of fish that they're taking out of the native reef system. And most importantly, they have 0 known predators here. They've got those big spines, they look pretty scary with their stripes, and nothing really knows to eat them. But as some control measures, we know that we can eat them because they're venomous, not poisonous. So if you snip off those spines, they're actually quite delicious to eat. And in the Atlantic and Caribbean region, we have 164 restaurants that are actually serving lionfish. So in certain areas, you can ask for lionfish. It's really good as ceviche and lionfish tacos, really delicious that you can have. And in derbies or removal events that have happened around the region in recent years, almost 30,000 lionfish have been removed. So there's good things that are happening. Just some pictures to demonstrate some of those things. Here's a lionfish that we dissected, and this is a female. This is an ovary right here that's full of eggs. So when I talk about 50,000 eggs that are coming out of these guys every 3 to 4 days, that's what it looks like. Lots of eggs that are being built up, and then these giant egg masses get released out into the water. And when we look at stomach contents for these guys, we see a lot of different kinds of fish in their stomachs. This is a fish from a reef derby that happened in the Florida Keys. This fish had 64 fish inside its stomach, plus a shrimp for dessert. But that's a lot of fish. I mean, it's gluttonous. And we're actually seeing when we dissect lionfish that they have intestinal, they have intestinal fat. So lionfish are actually the first fish that we're seeing that are obese because they're just eating so much and there's nothing that's controlling that. So controlling the lionfish invasion, what can we do? I have a lot of people that ask me, well, why don't we go out and remove them all? Well, when we have that many fish and they're reproducing that much every 3 to 4 days, eradication is really not possible. But we can try to suppress the population. And so there's different methods that we can use to try to do that. So what's going on at our national marine sanctuaries, and specifically here at the Flower Garden Banks? Well, NOAA came out with a lionfish response plan last year, and it talks about the different monitoring, control, research, and education and outreach strategies for each sanctuary site that's dealing with lionfish. At the Flower Garden Banks, we have a lot of different things going on. We've got monitoring programs where we go out every year and do fish surveys and look at native fish and how many lionfish are there, and we're able to look at impacts to see if the native fish population is dwindling or staying the same. We also have control strategies. I will say that it is illegal to spearfish in the sanctuary, but we do have special permits where you can go out and remove lionfish for us as staff, and also the operators of the recreational dive boat, dive masters on the flame. We've got a lot of different research going on. We're looking at stomach contents to see what they're eating at the sanctuary. We're looking at different types of toxin levels within the lionfish. We're looking at what type of habitats they're utilizing. Are they on the shallow reef, or do they go down deep? We're also looking at age and growth with partners from Texas A&M University and partners in North Carolina. We're also looking at gene mapping throughout the Gulf and looking at parasites to see if any of our fish here have parasites. And also a bunch of different outreach, education and outreach activities. We do talks like this, we go to dive shops, we've had handling classes, We've done talks at the zoo, and do special events like Ocean Discovery Day that's happening next month at the NOAA campus if you want to come see our live lionfish there. So here's some pictures of what we do at the sanctuary and some of the tools that we use to remove and control lionfish. So we've established priority areas at the Flower Garden banks for removal, and these are the areas around our mooring buoys where we're doing most of our diving. And so when we see a lionfish, we try to remove it whenever possible when we're in these areas, and we do this with spears and zookeepers. So here's a zookeeper, and we've got a pole spear here. Again, this is a permitted activity. You have to have a permit to do this in the sanctuary. But we've got a nice spear, and it's got 3 tips that are very sharp, and they have barbs on them that you guys can see. And as you spear the lionfish, that prevents the spear from coming off the fish. And so you can take this elastic band, load it up, point it at your fish, and then let go, and then you'll be able to catch your lionfish at the end of the spear. Then there's these handy dandy things called zookeepers, which is basically just a PVC pipe with a funnel at the end. You guys see that? And so when you have your spear with your lionfish on the end, you're able to put your lionfish in the funnel and then retract your spear, and the lionfish stays in, and then your spear comes out clean. What's really great about this is that it's nice and hard. So those venomous spines that are very sharp and pokey can't penetrate this plastic. And then we can clip this to us as divers and then move on to our next site. The lionfish can't come out because of the funnel. And then when we're done with our dive and bring this back up onto the boat, we can unscrew the bottom of this, dump our lionfish out, and it keeps us safe and not it allows us to not get stung. So it's a really nice tool to use underwater. We also have needle-proof gloves, and these are really nice to use when we're handling lionfish on the deck so that the spines don't penetrate our hands. So I get asked a lot, well, why don't you just feed lionfish to the fish, to your native fish? Why don't you just feed it to an eel or feed it to a grouper? What would be the problem with that, you guys think? Spines? Yeah? What else?
You may not like it.
You may not like it. Anything else that you guys can think of? What would be a problem with feeding a lionfish maybe to a shark or a mean-looking barracuda?
Predatory colors, I guess.
Yeah, well, they're going to start to associate lionfish with divers, right? And so then this happens. This is a picture from a reef volunteer down in the Caribbean. And they had been feeding lionfish to fish and eels. And the diver got attacked because the diver had the fish in his hand, fed it to the eel, and then the eel bit the diver's hand. So it's never a good thing to have fish associate divers with food. We hope that in time, maybe native fish can figure this out on their own, but we don't want it to be associated with divers. Also, another problem with feeding lionfish to wildlife, and you guys mentioned it, is safety of the fish, right? So here's an eel that had been fed a lionfish, but there's spines that got stuck in its mouth, and this can't be very good for the eel either. So things to be aware of, you know, as we think about, you know, how not only lionfish impact us, but how also lionfish are impacting wildlife. So here's what we're seeing at the Flower Garden banks. In 2010, we didn't see any lionfish, even though they had started to come into the Gulf. In 2011, we had 1 observation, and then in 2012, it started to pick up. All of these are sightings that have been recorded by divers at the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary, and also divers that were out on the fling, and other recreational divers that were out on their own at the sanctuary. And we see that in 2013, It really jumped. 2014, we had a decrease at Stetson Bank, but east and west continued to increase. And then this past year, 2015, we're still on that increasing trend. So the invasion is still very much in the early stages here in the Gulf of Mexico, and lionfish numbers continue to increase as they colonize all this habitat. Every lionfish that we remove, which is as many as we possibly can when we're out there, we look at its stomach contents to see what they're eating. And so primarily what we see in their stomachs are shrimp, we see wrasses. A lot of the stomachs are empty because lionfish are out looking for food a lot of times when we tend to see them. We tend to see blennies and damselfish. I've seen a few grouper and snapper, but all of these fish in its stomach are recreationally and ecologically important to the reef. So this past year, we had a lionfish removal event that included staff from the sanctuary, but also volunteer divers from the community, because we need help with this problem. And what we did was identify those priority areas around the mooring buoys, which I mentioned earlier, and you see these as big circles on that. And so what we did was everyone that went out, we had 30 divers. They were all permitted to do removals. They had to go through a lionfish handling class before we went offshore. And all of these divers were advanced divers. They were nitrox certified and had prior experience to removing lionfish. So we really had the best of the best here in Texas and Louisiana to go offshore with us. So we went offshore and did fish surveys within a 100-meter radius of the mooring buoys at East and West Flower Garden Bank. And then after our fish survey, documenting how many lionfish we saw, all the divers that did removals jumped in and removed as many lionfish as they could. Then they came back up on the boat, we did another fish survey, and then moved on to the next priority area. The divers from the Marine Sanctuary did fish surveys outside in all of these blue areas, which were random sites around the reef. And so what we want to know from this project is are the removals working? Are we seeing lower lionfish densities where we're doing removals and possibly higher lionfish densities where we aren't? Because it's very expensive to get offshore. We want to make sure that this control strategy works if we're going to continue to do it. So we had a very successful cruise. Again, we had 30 divers, and in about 3 days, we removed 317 lionfish. 181 from West Bank, 123 from East Bank, and 13 at Stetson, just because we don't see as many at Stetson Bank as we do at East and West. We collected the largest lionfish. It was over 43 centimeters. That's a Texas record. And the smallest was just under 3 inches, at a little less than 8 centimeters. We had about a 70% removal rate, so we weren't able to remove everything that we saw. And that's because for those of you that are divers and have been out to the flower gardens, you know that there's a lot of coral, there's a lot of places for lionfish to hide. So just because you see them doesn't mean you have a clear shot and can remove everyone that you see. But overall, it was a success, and we're working on grant money to try to do another one of these trips this upcoming year. We got a lot of good feedback from the trip, had a great time, and this is a news article that made the Galveston Daily News of Paul Grammer and his Texas state record fish that he caught. So I'm going to have Kelly push play. I'm going to show you guys a video from when we were out doing this cruise. And I want you to count lionfish with me. So this is at East Flower Garden Bank, I believe. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, 15. I don't know if I counted this one already. So that's a lot of lionfish, right? A lot of lionfish in just a small area. So when we go out and dive, they're a very common occurrence now as far as what we're seeing on the reef. So we do our best to remove them when we can. So out of the 317 lionfish that we removed from the Flower Garden banks, how many reef fish do you think we saved? Any idea? How many reef fish did we prevent from being eaten from these 317 lionfish? A lot, yeah, a lot. Take a guess. 3,000? Way more. 10,000, way more.
100,000.
More.
You said they eat like
Million. We prevented 1 to 2 million prey fish from being eaten just within the next year. That's 1 year. Imagine if these lionfish would have been out there for 30 years. That's a lot of fish that would have been eaten. So every little bit helps, and even 317 fish that were removed, that's 1 to 2 million reef fish saved. So that's pretty cool. Pretty cool control efforts right there. We're also doing a lot of other things, as I mentioned. We've had lionfish handling classes that have been held at the Galveston campus, also at the Houston Zoo, and there was one in Corpus Christi this past year. And we hope to do these again so that as people go out and remove lionfish in different parts of Texas, they know how to do it safely. We have our poster right here, but we had a high school student that was interested in doing an art project, and so she created a really nice poster for us that has basic lionfish information. And you'll see this is actually an outline of a lionfish, and what she did was create everything that we've seen in their gut contents, she put into here. And so there's a really cool ID where you can ID what you see to what we've seen in the lionfish at Flower Garden Banks. And we've got these posters, and these are going out to dive shops in the Houston area here in Texas. Last year, we also were part of a sustainable seafood lionfish dinner in New Orleans, where we had celebrity chefs from around the region get together. We provided lionfish, and they got creative and cooked their best lionfish dishes for people to test at the conference. So it was like a mini Top Chef competition at the Seafood Summit. It was a great place to have it. It was in New Orleans. You know, they're known for food. And several of these chefs have adopted lionfish and now carry them full-time on their menus. So that was a really nice thing that happened as a result of this conference. I will say a word of warning. Lionfish at the Flower Garden Banks, we don't recommend to eat, and we actually don't recommend eating any fish caught at the Flower Garden Banks, because the Flower Garden Banks is a hot spot for ciguatera. Does anybody know what ciguatera is when I say that? Yeah, forgot about it. Yeah. So it's a type of fish poisoning. And there's a risk, as always, anytime you eat fish. But this is something that's common around fish caught in coral reefs. And it happens when you eat fish that have ciguatoxin in their tissue, you can get sick. It can make you violently ill in your stomach. It can cause temperature reversal in your body. It can last for weeks or months. And the more fish you eat with ciguatera, you don't become immune to it. It actually gets worse. So it's a really nasty type of fish poisoning. And there's been several fish caught within the vicinity of the Flower Garden Banks where people have eaten and gotten sick. So the FDA actually has a seafood advisory for the Flower Garden Banks. There's a 10-mile radius and a 50-mile radius warning zone. And so we're actually doing studies right now where lionfish that we remove, we take fillets and tissue and send that to partners in North Carolina for testing to see whether or not in the future it'll be safe to eat lionfish from the marine sanctuary. We do have a lionfish sighting forum. So for those of you that are divers and if you're out at the sanctuary, if you see lionfish, you're welcome to download this from our website, fill it out, let us know where you saw lionfish, at what depths, what times, and that helps us keep tabs on lionfish at East, West, and Stetson Bank. And then one more thing I'd like to leave you with is the Lionfish Portal. This was created a couple years ago, And it's a one-stop shop for all the lionfish information you would ever want to know. It's at lionfish.gcfi.org. It's got all the recent news, recent scientific publications, maps, information handouts, all kinds of things if you're wanting to know more about lionfish. So I'm going to stop there. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But if not, I will open up the tub and we will start dissecting a couple lionfish to see what's going on inside their bodies. Yeah.
Could you address a little bit about the consequences of losing those other fish species or the declining population of prey species on the coral reefs?
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question is, what are the consequences of losing native fish, basically? And there's been a couple studies that have been done, specifically in the Caribbean, where they've looked into that. And when a lot of the native fish are removed from the reef system, a lot of times what happens is a phase shift. So basically, when you remove all the little fish, the little herbivores that are eating the algae and keeping the reef clean, you basically remove your lawnmowers, right? And so then the coral reef starts to get overgrown. And there's been several instances where we've seen coral reefs go from a coral-dominated reef to an algae-dominated reef. So when you remove those fish that are eating the algae, then the algae starts to grow out of control. And you get a reef that is a lionfish reef, and a lot of the native fish are gone.
So that strangles out the corals, so it's killed.
Yeah, basically, so the corals get covered with algae and die. And so that's a really negative effect of lionfish. Also, in some areas, lionfish are eating native fish that are recreationally important. So when you're removing small fish that are important to fishermen, those don't grow up to be big fish that can later be fished. So there's a couple of different reasons of why it's bad. Yeah?
What are the symptoms if you get stuck by the spines?
If you get stuck by the spines, and I've been stuck, it's like a really bad wasp sting. Your hand starts to swell, and it's like a hot throbbing. And so the best thing you can do is stick your hand in hot water, as hot as you can stand, because the heat denatures it. It breaks down the venom, essentially. So you stick your hand in hot water, as hot as you can stand for as long as you can stand. It's also recommended to take a Benadryl to help with swelling. And usually in a few hours, you're fine. But for those few hours, you're pretty uncomfortable. Yeah.
Do they eat their own, or they, will a lionfish eat another small one?
Yeah, I've been asked that several times, and I was actually at a lionfish workshop last week where that came up. And there was a researcher there who said in one instance he's seen where there was a very small juvenile lionfish in a stomach, but that's only one instance in all of the studies that have been done. So it's probably not very common.
And the other question, for example, with that eel, are their spines venomous then the way they are to people? Are they venomous like that to the other?
Yeah. So fish and eels are definitely impacted too when they get stuck.
Folks are online. If you would type into the chat box if you have any questions for Michelle.
Yeah.
Has any research been done into some sort of birth control? Would it be specific to lionfish?
You know, that's come up quite a bit. Like, why don't we sterilize the males or do something? But that would be so expensive and really, really hard to do. And I just don't think that's feasible, although it has come up in different discussions that I've been in. Yeah.
So when we talk about fish procreation, is it unusual for them to spawn in pairs?
No, they actually do spawn in
I know,
pairs.
but unusual in the Encyclopedia of Fish, is that unusual for that species to spawn in pairs? Or is that common?
No, it's not unusual. Yeah.
Is there any thought of actually importing parasites
Yeah, and that's come up too in several discussions. But usually with invasive species, when you import something to try to take care of something that's already been imported, then you usually run into a whole other suite of problems that you can't even predict. So while that, would seem to be a good idea, there's probably some detrimental impacts that would happen if we tried to introduce something else. And we don't even really know, like in their native range, what eats them when they get to be adults. So there's so much we don't know, and studies really need to happen to lionfish in the Pacific. There's a lot that we could know, but they're rare. If you're in the Pacific and go diving and you see a lionfish, it's exciting because it's not something that you see often. Whereas here, we're starting to see them all the time. So it's a very different dynamic. Yeah.
Where it started way back, is there groups like your group that's trying to contain this and stop them from spreading more?
Yeah, so there's groups everywhere and divers all over that are, working to control and manage and suppress the population. There's several different marine protected areas all throughout the Caribbean that, have control efforts and strategies and go out and do, removals on a regular basis. And we're finding that if you have areas that you prioritize and do removals regularly, you can suppress the population and make it from getting any worse. But this is just a band-aid to the problem. It's not a solution, just one set of tools in the toolbox for management. Our hope is that in time, the system will be able to take care of itself, and there'll be some type of check and balance for lionfish here that maybe evolves, or maybe predators will learn to eat them as prey. But that takes time. So what we can do is do our best right now, and do removals and continue to do research to try to work on the problem.
If you're not in the marine sanctuary, it's just pretty much open season. Right?
It's open season in Texas if you're not in the marine sanctuary. That's correct. So all you need is a fishing permit. I think it's like $30 for a year, and you just need to make sure that you know what you're doing. You need to have the right equipment. You need to have a zookeeper and a good spear and have needle-proof gloves and make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because nothing's worse than being far away from shore and getting stung.
Michelle, could you tell them why we use spears and not something else?
Yeah, so spears are basically the easiest method. You could potentially catch them with hook and line, although it's not very common to catch lionfish this way. Spears are just the easiest way. Lionfish tend to congregate in an area and not leave that area. So you can swim right up to a lionfish and spear it, and it won't swim away because it's not in its nature to swim away. Its nature is to look scary and spread its fins, and that's its defense mechanism. So you can go right up to it and spear it. There's a lot of research being done right now with trap development to try to use lionfish-specific traps to catch only lionfish and not bycatch, but that research is, there's a lot that needs to be done there because it's really hard to just target one fish in a trap. But in Florida, there's lobster fishermen that get lionfish and lobster traps all the time. So, yeah.
Why don't whales? I mean, whales are huge. Why don't they eat them?
That would be great. There's a lot of whales that are filter feeders, so they're actually targeting plankton. Nothing big like a big lionfish. And lionfish tend to hunker down towards the reef. They're not in the water column, so a big whale, I think, is going to expend its energy looking for something bigger or, filtering out that plankton where lionfish generally aren't. Yeah.
Just a comment about the introduction of parasites.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely, you'll probably end up the same way cane beetles were an invasive species on crops.
Mm-hmm.
So they introduced African cane toads. Do a little research into that. That's a big invasive species.
Okay.
Probably the same issue.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Asian carp too.
Yeah, the Asian carp, man.
And they just took over the
Louisiana, the bodies and all that.
Yeah. And the tiger prawn, that's another big one. Yeah. Any other great questions, you guys? Anything else you can think of? All right.
Maybe we have one online. Let's see.
Hope it's not my mom. My mom's listening. I'm sure she's trying to stump
As
me.
people outside of the diving world who can't go out and capture them, how can we help with this problem?
That's a good one. In areas where lionfish are on menus, eat lionfish. It's the greenest fish possible. We can't eat enough of them. So that's something we can do if you're on vacation. And, you know, asking your chef at your favorite seafood restaurant, you know, hey, when are you going to carry lionfish? That's something that, you know, we can all do. You can support your National Marine Sanctuary System. You can get out and volunteer. So there's lots that, you know, we can do to help the ocean. And lionfish is kind of one of those topics where people are really interested in lionfish, and we can use that as a stepping stone to learn more about coral reefs and why they're important.
For those of you online who are asking about the website that Michelle offered, I put that in the chat box. If you go look in the chat thing in your menu on the webinar, you'll find that information for those two web links. Another question about how we help in Ohio with problem far away in the Gulf.
No, that's my mother. All right.
Wait a minute. Have any been found near shore?
Not in Texas, right here. However, down in Corpus, they have been found in Packery Channel, which is very close to shore. And I've been told, I was just in Corpus last week for this lionfish meeting, that there's a lot there. I don't exactly know what a lot is, but there's been several sightings of lionfish in Packery Channel. When we look at lionfish sightings in the Gulf of Mexico, lionfish really like structure. And they seem to be more further offshore where the oil and gas platforms are and the banks that are along the continental shelf. So there's really not a worry of, you know, going to the beach here in Galveston and, you know, getting stung by a lionfish or stepping on one or anything like that. However, in other areas, like the Florida Keys, for example, they're very close to shore. You can, you know, hop off your dock and, you know, snorkel a seagrass bed or a shallow reef, and they're very apparent. They're everywhere, and people do that. A lot of people collect them with hand nets and snorkeling in the Keys. So it just kind of depends where you are, but here in Texas, they're definitely further offshore for sure.
Other than eating them, what other uses are there for them?
Okay, I forgot to wear them tonight, but I actually have lionfish earrings. So people are using their fins and spines to make jewelry, and it's quite beautiful. It's really cool. My earrings are from a woman in Belize who's a fisherman's wife, and he collects lionfish for restaurants down there. And she uses the fins so that the whole lionfish is used and then sells them to people who are on vacation and taking cruises down there. And the jewelry is beautiful. So that's another use for lionfish. There's also research being done on the venom in the medical industry to see if there's any use for the venom in pharmaceuticals. So, you know, there is things being done to see how we can use them as far as, you know, aside from just eating them.
Is there a long-term lionfish management plan for the sanctuary?
Yes, and that is the control plan that I mentioned earlier. It's a 5-year plan, and you can download that off the sanctuary website.
Any of the coastal fishermen in Texas, jetty or surf fishermen, caught or seen any close to shore? So I guess that goes back to the
not that I know of, but they have been caught in shrimp trawls here in Texas.
Oh my God.
That's all of our online questions.
Okay, I'm gonna step away then, if that's the case. And I just want to show you guys a couple things. So in these vials here, I have fish, if you want to come up and look. And these are all things that we found in the gut contents of lionfish that we've dissected from the flower gardens. Here I have a couple of bluehead wracks. I have some damselfish in here, but this by far takes the cake. This is a brown chromis. It's a cool little reef fish, but this is pretty big, right? And this was in a lionfish stomach folded in half. So lionfish really can eat just about anything. They can spread their mouth really wide, and they're quite gluttonous. So feel free to come up and take a look at those after the talk. But I'm going to go through and do a couple of dissections, and I might need a helper. So does anybody want to come up and help?
You can go on.
For those of you online, if you will take your camera screen
In the
and
back
make that
of the
the larger
lecture.
screen, you'll be able to see what Michelle is doing for the dissection.
Alright. Alright, Dylan, nice to meet you. You want to put on you ever dissected a fish before? Dissected a squid? Awesome. You're perfect then. So go ahead and put that on. Get those on. This is what you guys have all been waiting for, you know. All right. Okay. So this is a lionfish that we removed from our lionfish removal cruise this past year. This is one of the 317 fish that came from that cruise. So you can see this is pretty big. Up here at the top are those 13 venomous spines. You guys can see these are super sharp. I mean, these are as sharp as any type of needle or thing that you can see. To be aware of when you handle lionfish, even after you freeze lionfish, it does not denature the venom. So I've actually, as I've dissected the fish, gotten poked, you know, as I'm handling them, and it can still give you quite a sting. So we've got these 13 venomous spines on top. We've got the one here on each side, here on the pelvic fin, and then here on the back. We've got 3, they're very small, sharp spines here in the back on the anal fin. You want to touch them right here? It's pretty slimy. You guys can see the striping on the fish. It helps it blend in with its habitat, but also the lionfish is able to flare its fins, and it actually allows it to look a lot bigger than what it actually is to other fish. So it basically makes itself look pretty scary. You guys can see that it has a very large mouth. It can open very wide, and so that's why they're able to eat things like this brown chromis and fit it in its stomach, because it can suck it in its mouth and eat a whole fish. So they're able to eat quite a lot. Here on the sides, along the gill plate, they have these barbs. You want to touch that? Pretty sharp, huh? Yeah, pretty spiky. And so that's another thing you have to be careful of when you look at lionfish. In the sides, right behind the eyes, are something called otoliths, and those are basically ear bones of the fish. And Ray Walker is here in the audience. Give a wave. She's a graduate student at Texas A&M, and she's partnering with us to look at the ear bones of the lionfish because they have rings on them. And like rings of a tree, you can tell how old a fish is by how many rings are in the otolith. So Raven has the fun job of taking all the lionfish heads that I give her, digging out the ear bones, and then counting little tiny rings on a microscope to figure out how old these guys are and how fast they grow. So what we're going to do is take a fin clip, and we take fin clips from the very top of the dorsal fin here in the back where it's nice and soft. Here on these soft fins, you want to touch these? These are not venomous, so these are the safe parts of the fish to touch. And when we take fin clips, then we can take the DNA that's within the tissue and run genetic analysis to learn about what species. Do we have Pterois volitans or do we have Pterois miles at the sanctuary? So what I'm going to do is, you want to take that box from me right there and take off the lid? Thanks, Dylan. Those little tubes are going to fall out, so just be careful. Yeah, perfect. And we're gonna take out this top tube right here. Yep, and I'm gonna have you open it up for me, okay? There's ethanol inside, so that's an alcohol preservative. And this is what we do when we dissect the fish at the sanctuary. I take just a tiny little snip, doesn't have to be very big, and then that goes in our sample vial. And then we can send that off for genetic testing. So that just screws right back on. And we can put it right there. Now here comes the less delicate part, and that's getting into the body cavity of the lionfish. And the best way to do that is to cut off the head. And so what I'm going to do is make a cut right at the base of the gills. And it's not very delicate, you guys, I'm sorry. So there we go. So you can see again, we have a very large mouth. We have the gills here in the back, and then the otoliths, the ear bones, are right here behind the eyes. You want to check that out? Yeah. Pretty cool, huh? So then the best way to get into the lionfish to look at sex and look at the organs is, once the head's off, is to just make a cut down the middle. And then start to go down the insides here. And so we can peel the lionfish open. And I'm not sure how well you guys can see, but there's white fatty deposits right here surrounding the stomach and intestines. And this is intestinal fat. So we have a lionfish that's got stomach fat inside, and it's from, again, overeating. We have lionfish that are gluttonous, that are eating too much, and they're actually getting fat. As we peel away the organs, I can see on the side there's this long organ right here. This is a reproductive organ, so we have a male. This is a testy, and there should be one on the other side, right here down along. If we would have had a female, this would have been, the ovary would have been much bigger and rounder, and it would have been easy to tell. So what we have in the back here is the stomach. And what I do is kind of peel that intestinal fat away, and then I can make a little sliver down the stomach here and see what they're eating. And it looks like in this lionfish, we have a very, we've got a small fish that looks like a little red-lipped blenny. Poor little guy. And so what we do when we can identify them just visually, we'll take the size, and when we can't identify them, then we will put them in a sample vial for genetic testing to try to figure out what's in the stomach based on DNA analysis. So that's it, you guys. You now know how to dissect the lionfish. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to do one more really quick just to see what's in the stomach of this one. You want to do another one? Yeah. Okay. And I think I'm just going to move this one just over here. That way you can check it out. So real quick, each lionfish is different. So the striping pattern on each fish is unique. And so there's actually researchers working on lionfish photo recognition software, which is really cool research. It's the same type of software that wildlife researchers use on zebra stripes in Africa to identify zebras. And they're working to use that in lionfish-specific traps and different types of robotics to trap and recognize lionfish underwater. All right, so real quick, this lionfish, like the other, loses its head. I'm gonna check that one out. And when we have dissection days at our office, it gets really stinky when you do like hundreds of these all day long. So it looks like we have another male. Along the side here is the testy that's here on the side. It looks like this one doesn't have, oh yeah, it's got a lot of intestinal fat right here. And we're gonna open up the stomach and see if there's anything of interest. And what I see here is a bunch of digested bits, but I've done enough of these that I can recognize this as a red night shrimp. I see black little beady eyes and red fins and some striping here. And so even though that probably looks like a pile of mush to you guys, it's a little red night shrimp that we see on the reef when we do our night dives. And that is by far the most common thing that we see in the lionfish stomachs from the flower garden banks. So I'm gonna end it there, but I'm gonna have these lionfish out. If you guys wanna come up, check it out, check out the venomous spines here, check out a lionfish head. So feel free to come on by and you know, we can point out the different organs and things that we see inside if you are interested.
We have another question online.
One more thing.
Which of the two kinds of lionfish arrived first and how did both end up here?
Ooh, so I've got some slides that are really cool. If you'll give me a second, I can answer that.
All right.
I'm just gonna have Dylan put this fin clip here in this file, because these lionfish will be used for genetic